Hello everyone, today we are continuing our discussion of afterlife and funerary customs for the personality study of Akhenaten from the Year 12 Ancient History Syllabus, though today we are focusing specifically on the royal tombs. Our agenda is to discuss the royal tomb and to highlight some key features that are reflective of changes to afterlife beliefs and funerary practices. To help develop understanding of the tomb, we will be looking at its location, the layout of the tomb, decoration, archaeological finds, before briefly discussing the existence of the other royal tombs at Amarna. The learning outcomes, according to the New South Wales Ancient History Syllabus, is to account for the nature of continuity and change in the ancient world, as well as to analyse and interpret different types of evidence to support a historical account or argument. As a result, this mini lecture is heavily based on the archaeological evidence or primary sources to help forge this historical account of Akhenaten's religion. To begin, the royal tomb, number TA26, is located in the royal wadi at Akhenaten, also known as the Wadi Abu Hasar el-Bari. It is carved deep into the rock, some 6 kilometres from the entrance to the wadi and 10 kilometres from the heart of the city. From the very beginning of the move to Amarna, it is clear that Akhenaten intended for this tomb to be buried in this wadi. This is evident according to Boundary Stele U, which reveals that this decision was based on a decree by the Aten. As we discussed last lecture, this was completely against traditional Egyptian funerary customs, as tombs were located on the west bank. To quote, "Let a tomb be made for me in the eastern mountain of Akhenaten, let my burial be made in it in the millions of jubilees that the Aten my father has decreed for me." The inscription goes on to include Nefertiti and their daughter Merit Aten, indicating that this decision affected others in the royal family, and the importance of this would become transparent later in this presentation. Thus, we then have a royal tomb located on the east bank, found deep in the desert and carved into the rock face. However, before we move on, it is important to recognise that this tomb has suffered significantly from ancient and modern vandalism, and furthermore, the objects within the tomb were systematically destroyed after the Amarna period. As we covered in the last lesson under funerary beliefs, names and representations of the body were essential to survive in the afterlife. As a result, destroying names and objects in a tomb can be seen as an example of damnatio memoriae, meaning condemnation of memory. As discussed by McClymont in 2016, such erasures and acts of destruction suppress power, change the specific version of collective memory of the period, as well as, perhaps most significantly, denying the targeted person a place in the afterlife. The royal tomb has a distinctive layout featuring a bent substructure, which was introduced earlier in the 18th dynasty, together with numerous chambers to accommodate the burial of other family members. This addition was an innovation that dates late in the reign of Amenhotep III and was expanded upon, as these additional burial chambers had their own subsidiary rooms, likely designed to hold funerary equipment. These additional rooms are cut on the right of the main corridor for the burials of Nefertiti and their daughter, Akhenaten. In terms of layout, the tomb is cut deep into the cliffs with 2 staircases and a ramp forging the descent into the burial chamber that was intended for Akhenaten and Tai. It is believed the use of the ramp was designed to help introduce the sarcophagus to the burial chamber, and is also a novel feature of this tomb, as it is the earliest to have a ramp down the centre. To delve deeper into the layout, the tomb entrance is on the right, labelled A. The first corridor on the right, labelled as B1 to 6, is believed to be a series of burial chambers constructed for Nefertiti. The next series of chambers on the right, being Alpha, Beta and Gamma, are believed to have been burial chambers for Akhenaten and perhaps someone else. The final chamber, E, is the burial chamber of Akhenaten, though in addition to the mummy of Akhenaten, it seems to also have held the burial of his mother. Furthermore, the decoration of the tomb is highly unusual within the larger context of Egyptian funerary beliefs and customs. The chambers of this tomb contain no reference to funerary texts such as the Book of the Dead, and instead focus on the worship of the Aten through the royal family. As a result, the scenes mostly focus on royal activities. This includes prayers at the temple at sunrise, together with the king and his family making offerings in the temple court, while other scenes depict groups of soldiers with chariots waiting for the worshipping family. The inherent focus is thus covering the daily life of the royal family and how they spent their day worshipping the Aten, while the inhabitants of Akhenaten in turn demonstrated their respect to the royal family. Additionally, notable tableaus include the mourning scenes of Princess Akhenaten, which are perhaps the most famous and controversial features of the tomb. A series of scenes across rooms Alpha and Gamma specifically show women mourning in various poses of grief. In this example, Akhenaten is on a bier, with her parents Akhenaten and Nefertiti at the foot of the bier mourning her. Outside of the door of the death chamber, a woman is seen nursing a baby. The identification of this baby is unclear, with various scholars attributing it to a recently born child of Nefertiti as a young Tutankhamun, or others as the child of Akhenaten, who just died from childbirth. This is in itself controversial, as historians have hypothesized that Akhenaten was the father of this child and thus is an example of incest. However, Dodson in 2009 proposed that if Akhenaten died in year 14 of Akhenaten's reign, she may have been only 10 at the time of her death and thus physically unable to conceive and bear a child. The other alternative is that this child belongs to someone else who was also buried in Chamber Alpha, who did actually die in childbirth, though according to the latest research, there is no space except for the name of Nefertiti next to the child, so it is currently believed that it must be a reference to her latest child. This additional example depicts Akhenaten within a bower being mourned by her parents and 3 sisters. Behind them, women are shown in various poses of grief. The bower on the left has been equated with a birth pavilion, which in part contributed to the theory that Akhenaten died in childbirth. Though the combination of a bower, an infant, and a dead daughter who passed away prematurely would seem to equate a death in childbirth, there is another aspect we must consider. According to Dodson, on no other occasion in the whole of Egyptian history do we find decoration of a tomb that even hints at the cause of death. Thus, it would seem highly unlikely that Akhenaten, or the now anonymous occupants of Room Alpha, died giving birth. This image is considered a double death scene, though the identification of the 2 deceased is not ascertainable. Here again we can see a woman nursing a baby and Akhenaten and Nefertiti before the bier at the top, and Nefertiti probably at the bottom, suggesting that they were members of the royal family. The death of 2 members of the royal family in a relatively short period of time appears to have impacted the use of the tomb, and it is currently considered, according to Dodson, that the use of the Chamber Alpha as the burial chamber was a secondary choice. In addition to the fragmentary decorative landscape of the tomb, other finds in the tomb include shabtis. Of these shabtis, only one complete figure is known, which is the one in the centre of this slide from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, accession number 1982.50. Furthermore, according to Martin's publications of the objects in the tomb, over 200 shabti fragments were found. Of these numerous shabtis, none of them contain chapter 6 from the Book of the Dead, which was the traditional spell that compelled the figure to perform work for the deceased in the afterlife. This in turn is further evidence of the dramatic impact of the art and theology on traditional Egyptian funerary beliefs. Another significant find was the royal sarcophagus of Akhenaten, currently in the Cairo Museum, though as you can see it was deliberately broken into pieces. In regard to changes in funerary customs, you can see here that Nefertiti is depicted on the corners of the coffin as a protective goddess, rather than traditional Egyptian goddesses, indicating yet another change in funerary customs. The canopic chest of Akhenaten itself was discovered in a fragmentary and shattered condition in the tomb. It has now been reconstructed and is in the Cairo Museum. Notably, while the chest itself was discovered in the tomb, the 4 canopic jars within are believed to have been relocated to Thebes by Tutankhamun. For example, this canopic queen was discovered in KV 55 and may have been reused at that time for the burial of another member of the royal family. Other finds are varied and include jewelry such as bracelets, rings, as well as scarabs and faience objects. In addition to the tomb of Akhenaten, 4 other tombs have been discovered in the royal wadi, however they are in an unfinished condition. TA-27 was left unfinished and has a long stairway with 20 steps and a central slide. TA-28 has a simple stairway with a small room on the left near a second stairway. TA29 has the longest extension, with 4 descending corridors following a simple stairway with 11 steps. The remains of a pink granite sarcophagus was found in this tomb in 2005 by Mark Gobold. It has been suggested by Dodson and Ikram that this tomb may have been begun for Tutankhamun or perhaps Neferu-Aten. TA30 was left unfinished with a descending stairway of 8 steps and may have been used as an embalmer's cache. TA28 and 29 appear to have been planned for other members of the royal family, though there is little evidence to identify them. In summary, the royal tomb, despite its heavily damaged condition, is notable for a number of reasons. Firstly, the decoration changed to focus on royal family and the worship of the Aten. Secondly, there are a number of unique scenes showing the king and queen mourning the deaths of 2 members of the royal family. Thirdly, Shabtis no longer contained a spell from the Book of the Dead. And fourthly, Akhenaten's sarcophagus depicts Nefertiti on the corners instead of the traditional Egyptian goddesses. Thankfully, the non-royal tombs are in a much better state of preservation and can shed even more light on funerary beliefs and customs during the Amarna period, which will be discussed in the next mini lecture.